Hello, friends. I'm Sarah from Dandelion Seeds Positive Parenting, and one of the most common questions I get is this: what if I have really and truly actually messed up my kids? There is a lot of fear out there about how our children are turning out, and if they are not turning out optimally, we are often really concerned that it is 100% unequivocally because of something we did or something we do on an ongoing basis. Well, you will find a lot of parenting educators out there who will say, oh my goodness, of course you didn't mess up your children. Of course your children are fine. Of course you didn't do anything wrong. And I don't find that particularly helpful. I find that dismissive. If somebody says to me, oh no, of course you didn't do that, I think you're not hearing my deep-seated fear that I have actually caused damage or harm of some sort. And that doesn't help me get over my fear. That helps me feel like I'm not being heard, like I have nothing to walk away with. It's actionable, like I don't know what to do next. But my fear that I have actually messed up my child doesn't just magically disintegrate into thin air because somebody told me I'm wrong. So, unlike that type of advice, I am going to invite you to lean into this fear. It may seem counterintuitive at first, but what happens if we say, you know what, maybe we haven't always been the parent that we wanted to be. Maybe our child is in some way suffering as a result of the parenting that I, the adult, have caused. What do we do with this? Well, first of all, we can acknowledge that maybe it's true, but anytime we throw in a maybe, there's a counterpoint. The counterpoint here is maybe not. Maybe things are okay. Maybe my child is where they need to be developmentally, socially, and otherwise. We'll talk about that in a second. But lest I get into dismissing your fears once again, let's lean back into this uncomfortable space of maybe I have messed up. First thing we need to do, if that's the case, is acknowledge it. As Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson say, name it to frame it once again, right? You've heard me say that before. And once we name the possibility that we may have made a mistake or perhaps many mistakes, this is something we can work with. Now, how we work with it is we move from a place of shame to a place of action. We move from a place of helplessness to a place of empowerment where we can do something about it. As Brene Brown says, and I'm not quoting her exactly, but the gist of it is shame tells us that we are a mistake, whereas guilt tells us we've made a mistake. It is okay to have guilt. Guilt is an effective teacher. And if we feel guilty about the things we've done that may have negatively impacted our children, guilt can be a motivator to do things differently going forward. If we get stuck in shame land, though, we feel that we are a mistake. We are a bad person. We are a bad parent. And this self-judgment and these damaging labels do not serve us in healing the relationship. So let's be real. Let's accept the fact that we have all made mistakes. Some of us have made really big mistakes. And we can say these mistakes are teachers. These mistakes tell us the things that we don't want to repeat. We don't want to look back and say, yeah, that's optimal parenting. Maybe it's not. And there is an incredible space called self-compassion, self-forgiveness, where we get to say, you know what? That was a me, that was a version of me who didn't have the tools or the skills to do things differently. How do I know that? Because I didn't. Now, we may have known intellectually what we were supposed to do, but perhaps we have some hard wiring through our family of origin or some other cause that rendered us unable to support our children in ways that perhaps we even knew cognitively to be beneficial to them. What we can do now is learn some new tools so we don't have to go back down that road that we didn't enjoy walking down in the first place. So we can use our guilt, we can use our embarrassment, our sadness, our grief, and acknowledge those things and say, you know what? I get to grieve the mistakes that I made. I get to lean into the pain that I caused, but know that even if I caused this pain, even if I caused this damage in my child, there's hope. There are new ways to parent. There are new skills I can learn through the gift of neuroplasticity. I keep touching my head here because I've got a brain inside, and the brain is wonderfully flexible. It can learn new patterns, even if it's something that we've been carrying around for generations, even if it's in our hard wiring, so to speak. We can change and we can create new neural pathways through this beautiful organ called the brain, perhaps not visually beautiful, but you know what I'm saying. And we can create better paths going forward and say, this is the parent I want to be. Now, here's the thing. We don't aim for perfection here. We might have this pedestal parent, this perfect version of this parent, and we think, if only I could be that person, then my child wouldn't be suffering so. My child could heal from the mistakes I've done. You know what? Let's take this pedestal parent and get rid of her or him. Let's not pretend that this ideal exists, because it doesn't. I make mistakes every day. You make mistakes every day. Every parent who has ever existed in the past, present, and future of parenting has made mistakes, is currently mistakes, and will continue to make mistakes. There's no perfection here. What I encourage you to do is get very, very specific about the kind of parent you want to be. First of all, what are your core values? What's important to you? You might write down, and I encourage writing this down because it helps clarify for you what you want to accomplish. You might write down, I value being a loving parent. You might write down, I value being a present parent. I might write down being an involved parent. Okay, great. What comes up for you? Write down your things. But guess what? That by itself is not going to help you one bit. Well, why did I say it then? Because this is the gateway to the specifics that will help you. Well, what do those look like? I don't want you to write down your don'ts. Don't yell anymore. Don't punish anymore. Don't whatever anymore, because we don't learn in negatives. We learn in positives and affirmatives. So I want you to take your pen. In fact, if you need to pause this video right now, go get a pen and a piece of paper. And I want you to write down 3 things that you can do today to model being the type of parent that you want to be. Now, these need to be itty bitty specific things you can do. They are not general things like be nicer, be more patient. Again, okay, let's solve world hunger, right? These are impossibilities when we don't know what they look like in our day-to-day interactions with our children. So you might write down, for example, I'm going to take a couple of very random ones. These may or may not be your things, but I might say, and I'm working with what I have in the room here, I might say, you know what, this is my phone. I'm turning it off for 1 hour, not just silencing it, but I'm turning it all the way off for 1 hour. So with that, perhaps if I have a concern with being on my screen too much, you know what? It's not even accessible to me for an hour. Or perhaps if I can't have it off because I get urgent things sometimes, perhaps I work in the medical field and need to get a text message if I'm needed at work or something like that. You know what? Maybe I will put my phone in a drawer instead of up here on the counter, where I'm less likely just to go over and, tap it a couple of times just to check in. Find some way, if presence is your goal, to be more present. And that might be something as simple as, for 1 hour, I'm going to do this. If you can't commit to 1 hour, you know what? For 10 minutes, I'm turning off my phone. And that's that. And this might be really hard. You might not want to let go of your thing, be it your phone or whatever. You might not want to do it for 10 minutes. Sit with your discomfort and view your discomfort as a messenger. What's it telling you? If it had a voice, what would it be saying you need? What are you longing for when you do this thing? Let's take another example. Let's say I want to be more loving with my child. Okay, this is another doable one. When I say more loving, that also is fairly nebulous. What does loving look like to you? Again, if you need to, pause the video here and write down what loving looks like to you. You know what? Start small once again. I have a goal of giving my child 3 hugs today. Or whatever it is. If the child doesn't like hugs, do something else. Find some way to embody the loving parent that you want to be, if you want to be that. I'll take one more example. Let's say you want to yell less. Okay, this is a hard one. The positive version of that is I want to be more peaceful, or something similar to that. So sometime today, and again, pen and paper, write down something you can do when you feel tempted to yell. What is that very, very specific thing? We all have calming strategies, and especially for those of us who are not accustomed to using our calming strategies, find some way that you can manifest a calming strategy that's going to work for you when you're triggered, even if it needs to be trial and error. You know what? One time today when I feel like yelling, I'm going to give myself a big bear hug, because proprioceptive input, which is what this is called, helps tell my body that I'm safe. Maybe that doesn't work. Forget the self-hug. Okay, maybe I'm going to try, all right, I feel my thermometer rising. I'm getting angry. I want to yell. Maybe I'm going to pause, and I'm literally going to push away that anger for a second. And I'm going to take 3 belly breaths. And that means I'm going to put my hand on my chest, another on my belly, and I'm going to breathe into my belly before I react to my child. Maybe you have something entirely different. Maybe if your child is older and slightly more independent, you can say to your child, you're in a safe place. I'm feeling angry right now, but I don't want to yell. So I'm going to go stand on the porch for 2 minutes. I'm going to set a timer, and I'm going to go outside, and I'm just going to breathe some fresh air for 2 minutes. And then I'm coming back to you. And in those 2 minutes, go and breathe. Do not take your social media with you. Do not take anything with you. Just go and feel that nature and its healing effects, scientifically proven healing effects, by the way, lowers blood pressure. All sorts of good things happen when we are in nature. So if your child is old enough that you can leave them safely for that amount of time, if they're not, take them with you. You might say, you know what, I'm feeling really angry right now, and I need to go outside because I don't want to yell. Here, come with me for a second. Put on those shoes, go outside and play for as long as it feels natural, and then come back. Now, here's what I want you to do. When you do any of these things, or whatever your things are, I want you to come back, take your pen and paper once again, and I want you to mark what you've done. I want you to visually see your success, your progress. You might say, 3 hugs, that's nothing. I have a lifetime, years and years of messing up my child. How are 3 hugs going to heal that? You know what? They're the first 3 hugs that you have done with a different mindset. When you catch yourself doing things right, you start to heal. You start to create those new neural pathways. You start to heal. You can, and perhaps should also, give your child a sincere apology. You can say to a 1-week-old child, You know what? I'm so sorry I didn't pick you up when you were crying earlier today. I was feeling really stressed and I didn't feel that I had the ability to meet your needs in that moment. So will you please forgive me? Now, a 1-week-old child is not going to say, well, yes, of course, mommy, I'll forgive you. No big deal. A 1-week-old child may not seem to care, but this is for you. This is about you releasing some of your shame, some of these narratives that you have been telling yourself about, oh my goodness, look at this damage I've caused. And obviously with an older child, you can have a dialogue, you can have an empowered conversation with them where you sincerely apologize without getting defensive, without sharing your side of the story in a way that puts blame on them in any sort of way, but modeling full accountability. You know what? I do not like the parent that I have been to you. And here are some specific things that I'm doing to change the course of our relationship for the better. And you can heal together, because when you move from a place of self-damnation, forgive my language, into a place of self-correction and self-forgiveness and self-compassion, you essentially give yourself permission to start releasing some of those old wounds that aren't serving you or your relationship with your child anymore. So these are just a few things you can do. Now, let's go back to this other side for just a moment. What happens if maybe you haven't messed up your child as much as you thought? We all know that we are our own worst critic. It's entirely possible that, yeah, you've made mistakes, because guess what? You're human. You will have made mistakes. I guarantee it. But what happens if you look at your child through the lens of normal development and say, you know what? Maybe my toddler is supposed to have some so-called problems with aggression because they're still figuring out boundaries and they have no idea that their physicality can harm others. The part of their brain that can even comprehend that concept literally has not fully formed yet. So a toddler who sometimes hits or kicks or screams or whatever can be completely normal behavior. If you have a 5-year-old who some people say is too attached, they just want to be with you, they want to be on you all the time, they just want to be so close, and you feel like you can never get a break, this also can be very normal. Children go through all sorts of stages of asserting their independence and then leaning back into deep dependence, because from this deep, deep, deep dependence, that's actually how deep independence grows over time. But it is not a lateral process. It ebbs and flows for a good long time. And a child who seems too attached may just be saying, you know what? I like you. I want to be around you. You're my safe person. You take care of me. You feed me. You clothe me. You do all of the things that you do to keep me alive. And for that, I am deeply grateful. Again, probably not a 5-year-old's words, but you will have a child who says, you're my person. You're it. I love you. You're wonderful. Let's hang out some more, like 24/7, right? That's their way of saying, maybe you're showing up for me in the ways that you can. And I like that. I like your hugs. Maybe I want more of your hugs, more of your time. Maybe I like being on your lap because it's cozy and I feel safe here. If you're creating that kind of safety where they want to be in your lap, I would vastly prefer that any day of the week over the 5-year-old who is so busy and independent that they want nothing to do with their primary caregiver most of the time. That sets off more red flags in my mind. You might also have the teenager who is pushing boundaries left and right, who is argumentative, who is struggling, who does not seem to be acting respectfully any time of the day, no matter what you do. And once again, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing anything wrong. It may just mean that they are going through the second greatest developmental growth of their entire life, above and beyond all the hormonal changes and everything else and social pressures and all that. They're going through huge brain changes in adolescence that can literally wreak havoc on their interpersonal connections because there's so much going on in here that it can feel really, really overwhelming to them. This does not mean that you have messed them up. This might mean they're struggling and they may need some more support, and you may need to find some new ways to connect with them and new ways to communicate with them. You may need to have conversations in ways that you've never had them before, but you can still do that within the context of being a loving, peaceful, present parent while still offering them the independence that their growing brains need so that they can leave the nest at some point that is coming up sooner, perhaps, than any of us realize on an emotional level. So all of these things can be very, very normal. So by all means, do check in with yourself and ask yourself, is there any chance that maybe my child is just a real child who has daily struggles, daily needs, and who is doing the best they can to get those needs met in any given moment? And yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I have messed up royally, perhaps on a very regular basis, but perhaps I'm still showing up for them in the ways that I can, when I can, and even while I'm learning some new tools so that I can support them more peacefully and in a way that will help nurture secure attachment, which, by the way, occurs in approximately 2/3 of children. So it is not some magical unicorn that does not exist. Secure attachment is statistically and very reasonably possible. And it's in these moments of security where you're able to create them for yourself and for your children, no matter what the past has looked like. Again, remember that perfect parent we talked about? Take them out. Throw them away if you must. Find some way where you can just be a real parent who models self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and who models specific action plans when things aren't working well. What does it look like for you today? My challenge to you is to take the time to write down what it is you want. My challenge to you today is to be gentle with yourself and not be looking so far in the rearview mirror at your mistakes, at your damage, at your pain, at your hurt, at your grief, at your ick, all of your ick, that you don't see the beautiful possibilities that are ahead of you right in this very moment. You don't know what tomorrow looks like. You have the opportunity to influence tomorrow for the better. And we will take steps forward and take many steps back as we grow. But just like children's development isn't linear, neither is ours. We get to mess up, we get to make mistakes, and then we get to repair to a place where we have a truly connected relationship with our children. And yes, they may need professional support. Yes, you may need professional support, but healing is always possible. I promise you that. Hope this helps, and I'll see you again soon.